Moonlight cast silver webs across the courtyard, highlighting the quiet stone walls that seemed haunted by memories of ages past. The castle was perched on a rugged hillside overlooking a winding river. In the valley below, flickering lights of a distant village offered feeble proof of life to the caretaker, who rarely left his post. Beneath the tall arches of the castle's entrance, steps echoed faintly whenever he ventured across them at night. He usually kept to a simple routine, tending to the grounds, sweeping corridors, and performing the odd repairs that centuries old structures often demanded. He was, after all, the sole keeper of these forgotten halls. An unspoken sense of loyalty tied him to the place, as though if he left, the castle would crumble beneath the weight of neglect. He had never bothered to question why this sense of duty felt so deeply personal. In quiet moments, the caretaker often rested in front of a cold fireplace in the great hall, gazing at portraits of long dead nobles. Their faded features spoke of regal lifestyles and storied romances that he could only guess at. At times, especially on windy nights, he believed he heard whispers from the corridors. Not ghostly moans, but the hushed lament of unfulfilled longing. It pricked his curiosity yet frightened him. For all his vigilance, the caretaker was a man who knew little about the castle's deeper secrets. After taking over from his late father years ago, he abided by his father's mantra: avoid the sealed sections, perform your tasks without question, and above all, never linger in the library's hidden recesses. One Wednesday morning, as dawn's light revealed motes of dust dancing in the main corridor, the caretaker set about his tasks. Bundles of old drapes and table linens needed laundering, and the cellar's lanterns required new wicks. He made a mental list of chores, all the while feeling the odd but persistent pull of the locked doors on the castle's western side. He'd avoided those doors his entire life, honoring the paternal warning. But something about that morning, perhaps the hush in the air or a surge of determination, made him linger near the heavy oak door with iron reinforcements. He traced the intricate designs carved into the wood, momentarily lost. That was when he heard a light tap on the castle's main entrance. Expecting a supplier or a wandering tourist, he hurried back to the front. Instead, he encountered a figure unlike the usual castle visitor. A woman stood there, a satchel slung over her shoulder and a purposeful gleam in her eyes. She introduced herself as a historian, specializing in medieval architecture and lore. She had come to research a rumored love curse that supposedly clung to these very walls. Intrigued, yet cautious, the caretaker invited her inside, breaking the unspoken hush that usually enveloped the place. Her name was Sylvia. She spoke excitedly about documents she'd found in far-flung archives, hinting that the castle bore a tragic romantic destiny. That day, he showed her around while she took careful notes on the state of the architecture, the dryness of the moat, and the age of the tapestries inside. Sylvia was much younger than most historians who sometimes pass through, yet her expertise was evident. She pointed out curious nuances in the stone carvings, explaining their cultural significance and the legends she'd read. He listened more attentively than he had to anyone in years. When they paused by a corridor lined with cracked stained glass windows, she mentioned old stories of star-crossed lovers who once roamed these very halls. Rumor said a young noblewoman had perished on her wedding day due to a grievous misunderstanding, a tragedy that left a permanent, ethereal gloom lingering within the castle walls. According to legend, anyone who dared to love within these grounds was doomed never to see the relationship reach fulfillment. The caretaker felt an inexplicable chill hearing her speak of it. Nonetheless, speculation had always swirled around old buildings like this. Curses were just myths, he told himself. Yet part of him wondered what kernels of truth lay behind them. That afternoon, after ensuring Sylvia was settled with a modest room in the castle's guest wing, the caretaker set about final tasks. As dusk approached, he realized with a start that he'd neglected to finish his laundry chores. Heading down a corridor seldom used, he tripped on a loose flagstone. Stumbling forward, he caught himself on a portion of the wall and felt the stones shift. Heartbeats hammered in his chest. He pressed again, and a hidden panel slid back, revealing a narrow passageway. It was dark as midnight, differing from the known corridors of the castle. Intrigued, yet shaken, he lit a small lantern and peered inside. The path seemed to spiral downward, thick with cobwebs and dust-heavy air. Curiosity overpowered his caution, so, step by careful step, he descended. The passage twisted a final turn and opened into a candlelit space, as though ignorant to the centuries that had passed. Shelves upon shelves lined the compact room, filled with crumbling tomes, scrolls, and folios. At the center was a wooden table bearing a single half-burned candle in an iron holder. Thick spiderwebs coated corners, and musty air made him cough. But the caretaker felt a tingling in his fingertips, the prick of discovery. The dim glow of his lantern revealed tapestries stacked in a chest, and he realized that these were likely the volumes his father had warned him never to touch. As he lifted one ancient folio, its cover blackened with age, he saw the insignia of the castle carved in gold leaf. The script was archaic, difficult to read, but faintly legible was a single word: Magdalena. He stood transfixed, scanning the time-ravaged pages. The text described a noblewoman, Magdalena, beloved by a young court poet. Their engagement had been a source of celebration until a misunderstanding sparked an irreversible tragedy. The caretaker's eyes flicked over the words in stunned fascination. The poet, convinced he'd been betrayed, had fled the castle on the eve of their wedding, leaving Magdalena distraught. She perished soon after, heartbroken. Legend said her spirit, so full of love yet burdened by sorrow, had cursed the castle, condemning lovers to the same fate. Shuddering at the words, the caretaker raised his lantern. Something told him that the answers to the castle's rumors lay here, in this hidden library he had stumbled upon inadvertently. The next morning, with Sylvia's curiosity piqued, he guided her to the passageway. Her eyes gleamed with fascination, and it didn't take her long to begin poring over the hidden texts. While she struggled with some archaic phrases, she gleaned enough to confirm the old story's authenticity. A powerful heartbreak had shaped the castle's destiny. It was more than mere folklore, she insisted. The caretaker, silent yet enthralled, watched her trace the ancient ink, noticing how her expression softened in empathy for the young noblewoman. He too felt something stir in him. Maybe it was a longing for love he had buried long ago, or merely sympathy for a heart doomed to loneliness. Regardless, their shared isolation in the castle's hidden recesses sparked a connection that neither could fully explain. In subsequent days, caretaker and historian spent hours together in that hidden library. They wiped away cobwebs, carefully handled ancient books, and illuminated previously unread passages by candlelight. At times, Sylvia's warm laughter would echo off the stone walls, momentarily melting the centuries of gloom. She theorized that the love curse might have form and power. Fed by heartbreak, according to the texts, with each doomed romance that transpired under the castle roof, the curse gained a stronger grip. Yet there was a fleeting reference to a remedy, a final resolution to the suffering. The caretaker's heart drummed as he read those lines. The curse might be lifted by an act of unwavering devotion, a pledge kept despite fear, ensuring that love flourished pure, unbroken, and unashamed, where once it had perished. They sought every missing page that might complete the puzzle, but many sections of the manuscripts were damaged by years of neglect, the ink faded or the pages missing entirely. It was a race against time. Sylvia had only been granted a few weeks to conduct her research before she had to return to the university, and the caretaker feared that, once she left, the castle's secrets would remain forever half buried. With each passing night, they found themselves pleasantly drawn to the glow of each other's company. Though weary from a day's research, they spoke by firelight about trivial matters: the caretaker's father and the old caretaker's father before him, Sylvia's own upbringing in a bustling city, the joys and pangs of solitude. These confessions fueled a gentle blossoming of trust between two lonely souls. bridging the centuries between them and the generation that had lived and loved in these halls. Yet an undercurrent of anxiety threaded itself through their late night conversations. Sylvia had glimpsed references to strange occurrences in the castle couples who had fought over misunderstandings, wedding engagements inexplicably canceled at the last moment, affianced visitors departing in tears. She believed these events confirmed the lingering presence of Magdalena's sorrow. At times, she urged caution around the caretaker's rising affection for her. He, on the other hand, believed curses were but illusions given power by superstition. If anything, the tragedy of Magdalena's story seemed a cautionary tale to cherish the loved one found, not to reject it in fear. Nevertheless, her warning weighed on him whenever he felt his heart skip a beat at her presence. One late evening, after sifting through a final scroll, they discovered a page with unusual script. It was a letter from Magdalena's hand. The caretaker and Sylvia struggled to interpret the archaic language, but the gist was clear. The young noblewoman's fiancé had mistakenly believed she had wed another behind his back. In truth, that other man was her cousin, a passing visitor from distant lands, to whom she had shown kindness. By the time Magdalena found her beloved to explain, the poet had fled. She wished that he would someday understand she had remained faithful to him until her final breath. The caretaker felt his chest tighten with emotion at the helplessness embodied in every penned word. He glanced at Sylvia, and she offered a solemn nod. Through centuries and stone walls, the heartbreak still resonated. With renewed determination, Sylvia insisted they examine every nook of the castle for more clues. The caretaker guided her to the neglected wings, the sealed towers, and the dusty music rooms no one had entered in decades. One stormy afternoon, while rummaging through a trunk of old letters, a sudden lightning strike made the caretaker instinctively reach for Sylvia's hand. She squeezed his fingers in return. In that simple, innocent action, the caretaker sensed the tenderness that had been growing in him. A wave of charged silence passed between them, brief yet electric. Then they stepped apart again, uneasy but exhilarated. It was not long before small gestures, an extra blanket draped over her shoulders when she shivered, a suppressed smile as they read something particularly absurd in an old text, affirmed the bond deepening in them. Yet Sylvia kept whispering about the curse. She did not want to test centuries of sorrow by letting her heart fully yield. He tried to assure her that curses, if they were real, could be broken by the power of genuine devotion. She would nod, half convinced, but caution lingered. In the ensuing days, a strange tension shadowed their research. A sense of foreboding settled on the caretaker, as though the walls themselves disapproved of the growing warmth between them. Twice, they almost collided with falling objects. First, a candelabrum that fell from a rusted chain directly above them, then an ancient painting that slipped off its hook in Sylvia's presence. The caretaker wondered if the castle was playing tricks, or if the centuries-old heartbreak was rearing its ghostly head to frighten them. Such occurrences chipped away at Sylvia's resolve to remain objective. She grew wary, as though the curse might truly sabotage any happiness blooming between them. Then, one twilight, they unearthed a significant document pinned behind a tapestry in a far corridor. It was a map of the castle, annotated with cryptic symbols and lines connecting the hidden library to another secret chamber. The caretaker's curiosity flared as they realized the hidden chamber was near the western tower, sealed from outside access. Eager to unlock one last piece of the puzzle, they made their way there, navigating dusty passages that ended at a heavy door. With effort, they pried it open. Inside, they found a circular room lit by faint traces of moonlight through a high, arched window. An ornate wooden chest stood in the center, bearing the poet's seal. Within it lay a stack of letters tied with worn ribbon. Letters the poet had written but never sent, presumably after he left the castle. Every page breathed regret, remorse, and an abiding love. He had discovered too late that his suspicions were unfounded, but pride and fear of rejection restrained him from returning. Through lines splashed with ink-blotted tears, it became clear that he had died with her name on his lips. Sylvia covered her mouth as she read, Her eyes glistened. The caretaker saw in her expression the same heartbreak that must have tormented Magdalena's spirit. He felt tears in his own eyes, acknowledging how precious and fragile the heart's devotion could be. Curses can be undone, Sylvia said softly, her voice wavering. She clutched one of the letters. If only he had trusted her, their love would have changed the story entirely. The caretaker gently rested a hand on her shoulder. We can change the story too, he whispered, realizing how those centuries of pain were culminating at this moment, urging them not to let fear cloud their own hearts. Outside, the wind rustled through broken windows, almost as if the castle itself held its breath, awaiting their decision. Sylvia looked into his eyes, and in that instant, they both understood the unspoken truth. They were standing on the threshold of love. A love that might be tested by ancestral sorrow, that might risk capturing them in the castle's heartbreak. They might also be the ones destined to unshackle the place from its tragic legacy, or they might become further proof that the curse persisted if fear drove them apart. He felt the press of centuries weigh upon him, yet in the hush of that chamber he leaned forward and they shared a tender kiss. A breath of warm relief passed through them, as though the castle exhaled a spirit that had been caged for centuries. That night, however, rest eluded them. Shadows outside their doors felt longer, and the caretaker's heart pounded with half-formed worries. In the dim lamplight of his small bedroom, he pictured Magdalena's sorrow, saw the poet's anguished regrets, and feared that the same fate might befall him and Sylvia. He tried to calm himself with logic. Curses were but stories, and they had discovered enough evidence to believe that the only true curse was the power of suspicion and misunderstanding. Yet a sliver of doubt gnawed at him. Would misfortune befall them if they chose to love freely within these walls? Morning came, heralding a crisp sunrise that gilded the castle stones. The caretaker rose early, deciding to quell his apprehension by pressing forward with their plan. Together, he and Sylvia gathered the poet's letters, along with Magdalena's final missive, into a small trunk. They carried these old confessions into the courtyard, a place bathed in fresh light, adjacent to a lively patch of wildflowers that stubbornly grew near the castle's foundation. There they knelt before a small stone well. The caretaker read fragments from both sets of writings, letting centuries of unspoken apologies finally ring aloud. With each word uttered, he hoped the spirits of the poet and Magdalena would find hearing, bridging their past mistakes with this present moment of love and forgiveness. When he finished, Sylvia stood quietly, warmed by the solemn beauty of the morning. She stepped closer to him, expression resolute. Magdalena and her lover were undone by suspicion, she said, but we'll find the courage to trust in each other's hearts, no matter what obstacles we face, even if it's just the weight of an old legend. She turned to face the well. May this castle see that love can endure. With that, she tossed a handful of wildflowers past the well's edge, letting them scatter across the courtyard flagstones. A hush hung in the air for a few heartbeats, as though the castle paused to concede that love, at last, was being given a second chance. For a moment, the caretaker almost believed he heard a soft melody floating through the archways, perhaps the final farewell of that ill-fated poet, or the sigh of Magdalena's soul finding release from heartbreak. A gentle breeze lifted the caretaker's hair. In that instant, a sense of peace permeated the courtyard. Sylvia slid her hand into his, and he felt a lightness in his chest. Centuries of sorrow did not vanish at once, but he sensed the shift. The sense of foreboding that had once shadowed them felt noticeably gentler. Perhaps the vow they had made in broad daylight had shattered the hold that suspicion once held. Whatever fragment of curse had lingered was diminishing. Over the next few days, a subtle brightness enveloped the castle. Rooms once cloaked in gloom seemed to let in more sun. The caretaker continued his regular duties, but found renewed joy in them. Sylvia organized the hidden library, carefully preserving the fragile documents and working on a short paper based on her discoveries. She planned to share the story so that the tragedy of Magdalena and her poet would not be forgotten. In stolen moments, they strolled along the parapets, telling each other simple truths, their fears, their quirks, and their quiet hopes. They came to realize that the castle's real curse might have been a lesson in trust, a tragic reminder of what happens when love falters because of suspicion. On Sylvia's last day, she packed her notes and prepared to return to the university. The caretaker helped her load a small cart outside the castle gates. A bittersweet pang struck him. She would be gone, leaving the place forever changed by her presence. Yet he chose not to doubt her promise to return, just as she chose not to question his promise to keep the castle's legacy of love alive. They had learned the catastrophes that arise from letting anxiety or suspicion cloud genuine emotion, so they shared a quiet goodbye, sealed by a gentle kiss beneath the same archway that witnessed their first meeting. It was not a final farewell, only an intermission. When the caretaker watched her cart disappear down the winding road to the village, he did so with a light heart. In their time together, they had uncovered a hidden library, pieced together a tragic chronicle, and breathed new life into a castle rumored to be cursed by love. More importantly, they had allowed themselves to stand firmly against centuries of heartbreak and declare that every romance deserves a chance free from doubt. For the first time in his life, the caretaker felt he truly possessed the liberty to shape his own destiny, and perhaps that of the castle, too. Days passed, and neither falling candelabra nor crashing paintings disturbed the serene corridors. The caretaker often ventured back to the hidden library, carefully cataloging the remaining books and scrolls. Now, a sense of calm filled that room. Every so often, echoes of Sylvia's laughter sparkled in his memory, weaving itself into the centuries old hush. He nurtured the blossoming garden outside, planting new flowers where the wild ones had once grown, offering a living testament to trust and renewal. Eventually, he would anticipate Sylvia's return, believing that the castle would greet her not with sorrow, but with open arms, free of the love curse that once haunted it. From lonely caretaker to vigilant guardian of a place reborn, he carried with him the knowledge that love, when tended with honesty and fortitude, can unearth even the most elusive secrets. In the end, the caretaker realized this was more than just lifting an ancient curse. It was affirming the hope that love, once found, can transcend fear. And so, the castle, once shackled by misery, began anew, a place where the echoes of heartbreak went quiet, leaving only the gentle hum of possibility in its wake.